so not far away. Everything I've brought today with me is a replica, although we do have one or two of the items. We actually do have some of the real examples at the museum. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk through the basics of Roman makeup, what they actually did, how we know, and what we find today. Now, my interest came from, I'm a reenactor, so I get dressed up as a Roman or an Anglo-Saxon at weekends, and always sort of trying to look for new things and trying to find out a bit more about the day-to-day life. And cosmetics and makeup was one of the things that came up. So what I'm going to be talking about today, and it's the same with almost, the further back in history you go, the more true this gets in a way. To actually find out what Roman makeup was like, we've got to look at lots of different bits of evidence from different parts of the Roman world, which stretched all the way from North Africa to the Scottish borders, and from Spain to Israel. So that is a huge geographical area. Also, you've got a period of well over 400 years. So not everything will be happening at the same time. So just to bear that in mind. In Roman times, heavy makeup was unseemly and it was associated with prostitutes. So you didn't want to make that mistake. The main principles were that you wanted a pale face, you wanted red cheeks, and you wanted to highlight your eyes darkly. Not as in suspicious or creepy, but with dark stuff. Okay, so a lot of the principles are quite similar to what we use today. So they would have a foundation, and certain parts of the empire were known for producing the best foundation. One type was made from sweat and dirt from sheep's wool. I nearly brought some unclean sheep's wool with me so you could experience it, but it probably would have stunk the room out for the rest of the day, and I wasn't sure that you would appreciate that. So that was just one of the things that you could use. Then on top of your foundation, you would put a powder. Powders could be made from lots of different things. So ground up lupin seeds, you know, the flower lupins. So there's some seeds there. You grind that up into a powder. Interestingly, in Italy today, they still use lupin seeds in makeup. I was reliably informed by an Italian person. They would also use other things such as lead. So this is kerosite, which is a lead ore, and this is hematite, which is another lead ore. And if you just want to pass those around so you can have a closer look and feel the weight of them. So that then went on.
They ground those up then?
You grind it up. Other things that you could use to make your face white would be things like china clay. Now this isn't quite nice. I don't know. I think you can actually grind the lead down quite a lot, but that's already in its nice powdery form. You could also use chalk. So in the sources they refer to things like as white earth, but that would be your chalk and your china clay and those kind of things. Or Illyrian irises. I'm very sorry I don't have an Illyrian iris to show you, but apparently you could also use that for a face powder. I don't actually know what an Illyrian iris looks like. Okay. So, eyes. This was your big thing. You wanted your eyes to stand out, and that's quite similar to where we are with modern makeup, really. Bear's fat mixed with lamp black was one thing that you could use for mascara. Now, I'm not going to pass this round because it's sticky.
Bear's fat mixed with?
Lamp black. And
Yeah.
So this is basically an oil lamp. You have a wick that is soaked in olive oil. You light that and you get a bit of light off it. It's not brilliant, but you can helps you see by it. But I don't know if you can see that you get the dark soot around the lip. And I don't know whether they did this, but what you can do is if you've got something else that's made out of pottery, while it's burning, you put it above and there's a very fine soot that comes off this, and you collect the soot on the underneath of whatever it is that you're using, like a bowl or something. Then you can scrape that off and it will be a very fine powder, a very fine soot. So you could use that. Ants' eggs was another thing that apparently you can crush up and
There's some disgusting stuff.
yeah, I really would not. These are, it's very difficult to get ants' eggs nowadays. You used to be able to get them from pet shops because you used to feed them to your goldfish. But these are just the remnants of some that I managed to get hold of. I did a display outside once and I put my ant egg out on the table and then watched them all blow away. So that's why they stay in the bag now, what's left.
What do you use ants eggs for?
That would go for mascara. And of course, your squashed flies. These are not real flies, you'll be pleased to know. These are just plastic flies, but yeah, they weren't really very bothered about anything like hygiene from that point of view.
Would the eggs be mixed with anything, or would it just be them?
Well, I think what you'd have, the problem with a lot of this is like the face powders and all this, the soot and the lamp black, is it wouldn't stay on. You'd have to mix it with something to kind of make it into a paste and make it stay on. And that might be something like olive oil or even egg. But basically you've got to have something that would glue it to you. So now eyeliner was also very important. I don't know whether to pass this round or not, because it's, yeah, if you just have a look at that. Now that is, yeah, it is the right one. That's coal, as in a cold pencil, you know, just the same as we use today. And this is actually from, I think this is actually from an Egyptian site rather than a Roman one, but it gives you the idea. So this is a little wooden box and you've got a little shaped sort of stick, and that's what you would use to put your eyeliner on with. Obviously works very well. And if you go to North African countries today, you can still buy coal as a powder rather than in a pencil as we might get it today. So that's one thing that we at least could still use. Another thing for eyeliner was frankincense. Unfortunately, this has lost its smell, but frankincense is a bit like a resin. We usually think of burning it and making incense and joss sticks and things like that, but you can actually use it as a pigment too. And also you could use the lamp black as a eyeliner or ashes. So all kind. Basically, if it's a dark colour, they'll have a go at slapping it on. It seems really. And if they're prepared to do it with dead flies, they're not really.
What colour does that go then?
Well, it's supposed to go like a dark black colour, but I haven't tried it.
Is that when it's ground up?
Yeah, Yeah, so, and then the eyebrows. I was watching something on the television the other day, and there was it must have been the news, because it was kind of like a fashion programme, and there was this lady who didn't, I'm not actually sure, was it a lady? I think it was a lady, but she was declaring that she'd invented this makeup, and she'd invented eyebrows, darling. I invented eyebrows. No, you didn't. You see what the Romans did with them. So the Romans would use soot. This is staying in the bag because I think you can probably work that out. But if you actually feel it through the plastic, that's very coarse. So it would need a lot of grinding up. I think things like the lamp black would be much finer and so much better for putting on your lashes and doing eyeliner. Eyeshadow, now there's a bit of disagreement about eyeshadow actually colour. One person who's done quite a lot of research into Roman makeup doesn't really think that they actually used any colour on their eyelids at all. But other people have suggested that they used a green substance.
They did in Egypt, didn't they?
Yes, they did, yes.
So if they sort of merged into Egypt, it wouldn't make you wonder if they did use.
Exactly, and that's one of the other things, is you've got cultural differences across that huge empire as well. So it might not have been fashionable in Rome, but it would have been fashionable in Alexandria.
Yeah.
So I'll just pass these around. That's a piece of polished malachite, and that's the blue is something called azurite, which I'll mention in a minute, but the green is the azurite on that. And I think you can actually see that you need to break the surface really, because this one's been polished, but you're going to have to trust me on this one. You can actually get quite a nice green powder from it. So, but not today. Azurite.
Azurite.
So malachite, we know that they're used in Egypt, and in some sources, you will read modern sources say that they use azurite as well for blue. But I'm not quite sure whether this is a bit of a mistake. Later on, azurite it's certainly used as a pigment in paint. And
when they did the mummies things, isn't it? When painted on the two, the two.
Yes. Yeah. And in medieval times, on pictures, azurite was actually more costly than gold. So it was cheaper to put gold leaf on something than to paint it in this beautiful blue. And just as an aside, that's one of the reasons why in religious paintings the Virgin Mary is usually painted in blue, because she's the Queen of Heaven, and the blue is the most costly colour. So just throw that in there. The other thing is there is, unfortunately I didn't get a picture of this, but there was a very lavish film made in the 60s about Cleopatra, and it had Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, and in one of the scenes she's got big bright blue eyes, so it's is that where people have got the idea from that they wore blue, which they didn't necessarily. Yes,
that's the one.
There she is. Yeah. As well as using soot, the one thing that was quite popular at certain periods, at certain points in the Roman times, was the monobrow. So you actually join the eyebrows up. I don't think we do that at the moment, do we?
Frida Kahlo did it, didn't she? The Mexican artist.
Did she? Right. Yeah. Well, they were quite big on the monobrow. You see that in some things, but these are pictures, as you said, from the. These are Egyptian mummies, but dating from the Roman period. So the sort of 100s AD. And even though these eyebrows are not joining up, you'll see that they do go right in. But some of them actually do join up and just form a single eyebrow. I have tried it. It certainly doesn't suit me, I can tell you that much. Another thing that you can use on your eyes, and there's a Roman poet that mentions this, his name is Ovid, and he talks about ash or saffron. And I think the ash obviously will give you a grey colour, but the saffron, that will give you a more yellow colour. So it's possible that they use these things. Your cheeks, as actually you can see really well on this, the idea was big rosy cheeks. So to get that effect, you can use something called red ochre, which is basically a ground up clay. So I should pass that around really carefully. Tiny amount of that, and it goes everywhere. But yes, you do cook with saffron. Yeah, very expensive. Yeah. So you could make your cheeks nice and pink with your red ochre. If you couldn't afford red ochre, or as a substitute, if you'd had some nice red wine, before we kind of process it as much as we do, there's always at the bottom of a bottle of wine there'd have been some residue, and you could use that, the lees of red wine, you could use that on your cheeks to make yourself nice and pink. That's the main things that are important: your eyes and your cheeks, and a white face. Now that wouldn't look natural, as you probably already know from other periods in time. Having a white complexion, that again shows that you are not out in the fields working, and you're therefore rich. So that is why they go for the white complexion. You would use what you could afford. So if you could afford things that had been imported from as far away as China, you would use that. If you couldn't afford it, then it's back to the dead flies and the soot again. So it's just you improvise with what you've got. There are some references to colouring the lips, but that's not as important. But we do have writers. There's a guy called Tertullian, and there's another one called Jerome. Now these are both critical. They're Christian, and they don't think that you should be wearing makeup. So they're criticising it. But they refer to bright purple, the most purple lips, and even there would be a variety of shades get mentioned. So you could have brownish red lips, bluish grey, violet, or even blue. Blue lips and a monobrow, it's the way to go. Okay, so that's basically the makeup that you've got. So how was it applied? Well, they did have brushes. I think this is actually synthetic, but apart from that, this is a replica of a brush. Got a bit of bronze decay on it there, so the green isn't meant to be there. Ignore the green bit, just needs polishing. But you'd have brushes made of animal hair to apply things with, and also things like a natural sponge.
Will the end be used for anything?
Yeah, the ends, you can get those on their own, and again these would be, I reckon especially, they're very good for scooping out small amounts of powder. But if you can imagine, if you've got to mix it with olive oil, you're going to be doing it just as at the same time that you apply it. So you might have a couple of drops of olive oil on there, and you might put some of your china clay on there or something, and then mix it up, and you could apply with that as well. So a multi-purpose tool. And these little pallets that they do use for mixing, these can be made of different kinds of stones, just got to be quite hard. This one's actually marble, which if you'd got marble in Britain, you'd be quite well off, because it's not exactly something we're tripping over. So, but with these things that we do find, incidentally, if you found this and this together, and that was all you found, you couldn't be sure that that was a woman's cosmetic set, because it might be a doctor's or a surgeon's kit as well, because they'd be mixing up poultices and creams and stuff like that in much the same way, and sometimes out of much the same ingredients. So that's some of the things you've got to put makeup on with, actually. And these are replicas. This is what they look like. They are nice things. They are beautiful objects in their own right. So again, this is something that wouldn't necessarily have been owned by everybody, but it does show that if you had enough wealth, then things like your makeup were important enough that you had expensive items to mix them and put them on with. Also, when we're talking about grinding, we find these little cosmetic mortars. So we get these quite a lot in Britain, and there is a thought that they might actually have started life as a purely British thing, and they're sometimes called woad grinders, for grinding up your woad before you put it on and went into battle. I think you'd need a lot of grinding to get the woad to cover yourself before you went off into battle with that. But they're not, I mean, this is only a replica, so it's not a real one. They do work, but it's not brilliant. It's a bit messy, I think maybe again it's for perhaps something when you've already ground it down to a certain level, you might be grinding it down just to make it a little bit finer. And they come in different shapes, but this is one of the classic ones.
Did they wear them on the clothes?
No, not usually. But there are brooches. There's a brooch where you've got a specific type of brooch, so it's not just one, but where you've got like you've got a scoop and you've got a nail cleaner.
That's it.
Yeah. So they do.
Yeah, that's what
I thought that. Yeah. Right. Done that. Other containers, you might have lots of boxes, and we know that they had sliding lids with sliding boxes with sliding lids. I need a holiday. And we have from graves a couple of sort of sets of things. And unfortunately, I can't tell you what date this one is, because the book helpfully doesn't tell me. But I'll pass this round, but this is from a woman's grave, and you've got combs. Unfortunately, the teeth have gone. You've got little boxes and little jars and things. There's a sliding box lid. This might be, it's either a fan or a mirror, but you do get things like this. Another thing that emphasises that these were precious, when they were excavating in London in 2003, they were excavating a temple, and people had left offerings at the temple. So if you're going to leave an offering, it's got to be something either monetary value or valuable to you. And somebody had left a little tin pot with a fatty material in. Now this is just a tin of lard, so I won't bother passing that round. You can imagine that. But it must have been very important to the owner who gave it to the shrine. I don't know what they wanted in return. That would be quite interesting to know. Some of these things, like the little boxes, they could be made of pottery, they could be made of glass, and they could be made of precious metals as well. So, as well as things like wood and bone, and I think they're supposed to be made of ivory. Now people, do you all want to be makeup artists when you've finished? Yeah? You all want to be makeup artists. If you were a Roman makeup artist, you would probably be a slave.
Yeah.
You might be quite a highly prized slave if you were good, but you would be a slave. So it's not a way to forge ahead at that time. Hopefully your prospects are better than that nowadays. But we have pictures. There's one in particular from Germany, and it's a woman sitting in a wickerwork chair, and she's got somebody doing her hair. She's got somebody holding a mirror in front of her, and she's got two other slaves who are standing holding the little pots and things. So they're ready to make her up. So you would be a status symbol, which is quite nice, but you'll probably be a slave. Now mirrors, again, something that we know they had. They don't often survive, but they did have glass mirrors. It's quite funny if you think about, because we're so used to seeing our own face in a very good representation, that to think that you had never seen what you really look like, that I think that's really quite weird. But you can polish, you can make mirrors from glass, and they could do that, but they're probably tending to be quite small. Also, Roman glass was more like this, so it's not clear. You can make it clear, but you've got to put something in it to make it colourless. See, this is like a slight greeny tinge. And if you pass that round and move it in the light, you can probably see that it's not even, especially the bottom bit. This is because it's been turned. But it does also tend to have air bubbles in it and things like that. So it wouldn't be a glass mirror as we're used to. If you were really rich, you might have a mirror that's made out of polished silver. Otherwise, you might have something like this, which is bronze. And have a look at yourself in that. That's quite a good one. So this one is not at all flattering. This is a bit kind of fun house mirror, this one. But you know, there'd be people who would think that was astonishing that they could see themselves like that. Yeah, you won't like that. Don't worry, you don't look like that.
It's just me before going. I've never looked. I'm alright. It's a good look. Yeah, it's like a little fun house one.
Yeah. You wiggle it about, it's scary. Scary
God, they
stuff.
look like a massive one, right? Yeah, that's a bit better, that one.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not bad that, is it really?
I wonder if it's because that's flat and that's sort of beveled.
Yeah,
gives you that. Yeah.
They did know that it could make your reflection bigger or smaller, depending.
Depending which way you
Yeah,
angle it.
yeah. No, that's just still pleasant. Now, unwanted hair, we have to admit, is a problem nowadays. It was just as much of a problem in Roman times. So you could have tweezers, and there's another little scoop there, and that's a little nail file for getting the muck out from underneath your nails. They would pluck, well, they probably pluck their eyebrows and things like that. But we also know that they did things like they plucked their armpits, which must have been so painful. You would also remove hair from your legs and your arms if you were particularly hairy. And there were certain kinds of creams, God knows what you would put in them or what they would have done. Acid probably. Or you could use something called a pumice stone. Do you know what a pumice? Yeah. So you could literally rub your skin with something that was quite rough just to make sure you got rid of the hairs. Not good, really. We have some indications that these things were precious, because occasionally, very occasionally, we know what a woman had in her dowry, and things like mirrors, boxes, ointments and glass flasks might form part of her dowry. So that was actually the wealth that she was bringing with her to her husband. So we know that was that it was valuable. Hare's blood apparently was to stop plucked hair regrowing. So I wouldn't advise that because I think hares are reasonably endangered nowadays. Applying this stuff was something that should only happen in private. People did not want to see you putting all this on you. And various poets made nasty comments. This is one by someone called Lucian, and he's very funny actually, but he's really cutting. So again, you have to take it with a pinch of salt what he says, because he really is. He's like this about everything. But he writes, "They are surrounded by old women and a throng of maids as ugly as themselves, who doctor their ill-favoured faces with an assortment of mendicants. For they do not wash off the torpor of sleep with clean water and apply themselves to some serious task. Instead, numerous concoctions of scented powders are used to brighten up their unattractive complexions. And as though in public procession, each maid is entrusted with something different, in silver basins, ewers and mirrors, an array reminiscent of a chemist's shop and full of mischief." But of course you cannot win either way, because women were criticised for trying to make themselves look better by using cosmetics, but they were equally criticised for getting old and losing their looks. So this is something by Juvenal, and he is saying, "When you get to the root of it, what he loves isn't his wife, but merely her face. When the first few wrinkles appear, when her skin goes dry and slack and her teeth begin to blacken and her eyes turn lustreless, then pack up your bags," his steward will tell her. So basically your husband's only interested for as long as you stay beautiful. That's nice, isn't it? I've mostly referred to women wearing makeup, and it was mostly women. Men did wear makeup as well, but they were, in the sort of the strict formal Roman sense, that was considered effeminate and a bit dodgy by Roman standards. But obviously, culturally, in Egypt, places like Egypt, men wore makeup much more often. and also in the Persian Empire, men wore makeup much more often, and that is probably one of the reasons why some Roman men hated the thought of Roman men wearing makeup, because the Eastern empires were the ones that continually basically beat the Romans up. So they just wanted to criticise them any way they could. So you've got all these different layers that have not really necessarily got anything to do with the makeup itself. Now, you have on your face animal fat, chalk, soot, dead flies, to say the least. So you're probably not smelling so good by this point. So you would wear perfumes, and they did wear a lot of perfume. Sorry, I just want to try and find. I'll pass this around. This is. I keep the lid on it because it loses its scent very quickly. So you just have to take the lid off. But that's rose water, and that was one of the things that they used as a perfume. And the Romans actually introduced roses into Britain, so that is something you could well have used in Roman Britain. They also used things like frankincense and myrrh, and again they would be imported, so they would be much more precious. Now this is myrrh. Have a whiff of that one. I quite like that.
That's nice.
And there'd be whole businesses and whole kind of factories making perfumes from things like that, mixing them together.
It's strong, that is.
Smell it, yeah.
Yeah, it's very delicate. And it's chocolate, I mean.
Oh yeah.
But again, this is another thing. Just as today, you still see it on makeup adverts, like, oh, this mascara will last all day, or this lipstick won't smudge and things. This makeup would definitely come off. So you would have to have it reapplied several times during the day if you wanted it on all day. But it might have been something, again, that you only put on when you were perhaps going out. Dinner was the evening meal was the most important meal and the most important social thing, so perhaps you would have it done then. So it all kinds of different things. Teeth, again, they did clean teeth, but some people saw it more as being cosmetic rather than actually a health thing. Again, they use disgusting things like ashes of dog's teeth mixed with honey. That's not going to do you any good. Powdered horns, so that's a bit of horn. So, and that smells, again, you'd have to grate it up. You'd have to really powder it. That smells disgusting when you grind it, when you break it up at all. So to then put it in your mouth as well. Another way to keep your teeth clean was to use a toothpick, and this is rather a elegant thing. So you've got a little cosmetic scoop at one end, and then this is a bird's head, a very sort of fine, like an ibis or a bird's head. You should just about be able to see it, but that bit is your toothpick.
We've got that today, haven't we? Our tooth, the other dentist, they're
Yeah.
shaped like that, aren't
Yeah, I haven't used that, so you're all right. And I'm just going to finish off by reading you a piece of a poem by a Roman poet called Ovid, who liked ladies a lot, especially if they were married to other people. And this is from something he wrote which is called The Arts of Love. It also tells you some of the things that can happen to the poor slaves who have the misfortune of having to put all this onto their mistress. How near I was to warning you, no rankness of the wild goat under your armpits, no bristling with legs with harsh hair. But I'm not teaching girls from the Caucasus hills or those who drink your waters, Mizzy and Caicus. So why remind you not to let your teeth get blackened by being lazy, and to wash your face each morning in water? You know how to acquire whiteness with a layer of powder. She who doesn't blush by blood, indeed, blushes by art. You make good the naked edges of your eyebrows and hide your natural cheeks with little patches. It's no shame to highlight your eyes with thinned ashes or saffron grown on your bank's bright cinders. Still, don't let your lover find cosmetic bottles on your dressing table. Art delights in its hidden face. Who's not offended by cream smeared all over your face when it runs in fallen drops to your warm breast? Don't those ointments smell? Even if they are sent from Athens, their oils extracted from the unwashed fleece of a sheep. Don't apply preparations of deer marrow openly, and I don't approve of openly cleaning your teeth. It makes for beauty, but it is not beautiful to watch. Many things that please when done are ugly in the doing. There you go.
Right, thank you very much.
I'll just pass. I just think these are really fabulous. These mummy paintings. I'll pass them round. But you can see they are not. I think she's one of the most beautiful women who's ever lived. But you can see some of the principles. But I don't think they look incredibly pale. I think that was one I passed around before. And that's another thing. What might suit somebody in one part of the empire might not suit someone in the other. So we don't know if there were regional differences or anything. If anybody's got any questions, I will do my very best to answer them.
What's the shell for?
The shell, actually, you can use that for mixing, like your palette. So again, that's some of the red ochre in it, which I've tried to wash out, but it had other ideas. So yeah, they're quite good. They use them for painting as well, mixing up your paints and things.